So have you ever walked in the doors of Unity, or ever stayed around Unity, or maybe you've had your first introduction to Unity, and you recognize that there's something a little funny going on? There's a lot of feeling good. There's a lot of clapping, there's a lot of cheering, there's a lot of positive thinking, there's a lot of positive thought, and there's just something that feels different when you're in Unity. It's one of the great things about Unity. It's something that attracts us to Unity. It can also be something that gives Unity an interesting public perception on the outside, from the outside. And part of that public perception can be that it's an easy, feel-good spirituality, that it's an easy, feel-good practice. Because you see people that maybe have circumstances and situations that show they shouldn't be feeling okay, and they're feeling okay. Or you see people who are working through some things about not feeling okay and not feeling good, but they're still affirming good. They're still calling it forth. They're still dragging it up and bringing it through them and bringing it into each moment. Unity can be thought of as an easy, lovey, posy spirituality. You hear things in Unity like, it's all good, it's all God. Let go and let God. You hear when something seems to be such a mess, it's in divine order. You hear a lot of little kitschy, catchy phrases, don't you? Oh, I had a bad thought, cancel, cancel. What are some that I haven't covered? Are there some good ones out there? Are there any that drive you crazy? Make you nuts? If the perception of Unity is that it's easy, wherever that perception is coming from, comes from a place that hasn't met the principles, that hasn't really met the principles. Because rather than being a fast food spirituality, rather than being a Sunday spirituality, rather than being, let me just sign on the line, give my offering, make a claim, make a statement, and I'm done. I can go home, and now it's free and easy. Now it's all good. Unity is a pick it up yourself, do it yourself, work it spirituality. One may be introduced to Unity and be in the beginning start really feeling good and saying, this is so lovely, it's all so lovely. And if we think that we're in this spiritual practice and our spiritual journey and part of our spiritual maturity is about creating a life that's perfect, that we're never rattled, that it doesn't have any deep issues or deep work to do, then we eventually wake up to this little disturbing illusion, kind of feel like we get hit over the head going, but wait, there's some nastiness here. There's some stuff here. There's some stink here. There's not supposed to be stink here. It's Unity. It's spiritual. It's my practice. It's my place. Not so true, is it? Because we know in our practice, in our sacred space, we show up wherever we are. That means all of us. And when we really commit to our spiritual practice, when we really commit to our spiritual path, we are shown things that can surprise and amaze and sometimes disgust us, even that are in our own minds, even that are in our own consciousness, even that are in our own actions. But the practice of Unity is about putting on your seatbelt at those times and riding that roller coaster. And yeah, you may be riding it, going up and down and saying, woo, it feels good, when in actuality it may be an intense experience, right? It may be an intense journey. We don't come to Unity and we don't come to our spiritual practice seeking to avoid our work. If we do, we can have that if we want. And it may seem nice, it may feel good. But spiritual maturity is about creating and allowing a state of harmony to experience in our life and a state of coherence to experience in our life. And it takes more work than having someone do it for us. It takes more work than just picking up a book, and it takes more work than just knowing an idea. There's a quote that flew by me this week, and it said, "Your beliefs don't make you a better person, your behavior does." Your beliefs don't make you a better person, your behavior does. Unity is about aligning those two. It's about coming into integrity with ourselves and doing it in a compassionate, open-hearted, loving, and yes, sometimes joyful and positive way. It takes a lot, though, does it not? It takes discipline. It takes introspection. It takes radical self-awareness. And it takes sacred accountability. And what I mean by sacred accountability is raw, hard work, taking a raw, hard, and open look at ourselves and our lives and our world, having compassion. Having compassion. It's almost like putting together pure love and boot camp. Right? Putting together pure love and boot camp. Because we know that anything, any spiritual practice, any idea, any experience can be used for good or used for evil, can be used to heal or used to harm, can be used to enlighten or can be used to cover up ego, can be used to emancipate or can be used to cage. There are some times where we hear words like it's all good and it's in divine order, that those aren't necessarily being used as affirmations, standing on a principle and calling that principle forward through us, but they can be used as excuses. They can be used because we're not being accountable for what is ours to do. Have you ever seen someone make an agreement or make a commitment, large or small, and then not show up for it and just go, oh, it's all good, it's all gone. It's all in order, divine order, it'll all work itself out. What does that mean sometimes? What does it mean? Sometimes it means someone else, I'm sure, will be gracious enough to clean up my garbage. Someone I'm sure will take care of my mess. Someone I'm sure will slide in where I was supposed to be. See, the deep spiritual practice is also about accountability. Has anyone here taken the Landmark Forum? I had a name before that. It's an intensive course. It's an intensive program designed to almost like the boot camp, but break down kind of everything we thought we knew about who we thought we were and what everything is about, and start putting in some new programming. And part of the thing about the forum and part of what you recognize with someone who's gone through it is they are incredibly accountable. The idea of being impeccable with your word, I don't know if anyone fully demonstrates that, but certainly people that have had this unity practice and certainly people that have engaged in these programs to look at our stuff have a high degree of accountability. And that doesn't mean a high degree of guilt, shame, and judgment on self. See, that is the traditional spirituality, traditional Christianity's role and way of making us accountable is to put down the hammer, to say, wake up, you are the smut of the earth. Wake up, look at how bad you can be. Wake up, look at how separate you can behave. Wake up. It's about getting an external authority to create supposedly better behaviors from within through damning, through judging, through scaring, through threatening, through making insecure, through making needy, through promises where you sign on the line and you get something. But spiritual maturity is about letting go of all of the external authorities, letting go of all of the external officers and enforcers of law and rule and spiritual practice, and drawing forth from the Christ within the highest consciousness available and becoming a true spiritual disciple, becoming a disciple to that cosmic enlightened consciousness that is within. And that means confronting some stuff. A lot of us have times and moments in our lives where we have externalized our authority, externalized our punishment. It can go from everything from the lightest example of getting a ticket to a greatest example of something that breaks our hearts open, or we feel like we've had a moment where we lose everything. It is ours to look at when we externalize our authority figures, when we allow the enforcer to be something outside of ourselves. That consciousness and that concept creates a paradigm. And the paradigm is one of victim and survivor. It's a paradigm of push and pull. It's a paradigm of right and wrong. It's a paradigm of black and white thinking. There is a new way to grow. There's a different way to live, is there not? Where we don't need a police officer, and I'm not talking about a real one with a badge, a universal one that's outside of us, where we don't need one damning us or shaming us, but when we have such a pure, raw, and authentic and unattached willingness to look at our stuff, that we allow it to no longer be bad, but we allow it to transform us. Do you have any idea, do we on this planet have any idea of how much transformative power there is in our stuff? But what does the human condition tend to do? The human condition tends to try to dress it up, pretty it up, make it look real nice, unquestionable. It tends to put it in a bag, tie it up in a sack, and push it as far away from us as we can get it. It tends to not look at it. It tends to be so afraid of it, so threatened by looking at our stuff, that we instead devise all these ego mechanisms, all these human mechanisms to get as far away from being accountable for our stuff as we can, because somehow that creates a sense of safety. If I could disconnect myself from it, if I could say, it's not about me, this is just my story, that's just what happened, oh, they're against me, oh, this is how that happened, this is how that happened, none of it has anything to do with me, it's all out there. The only thing that gives us is powerlessness, absolute powerlessness. Because if it's all out there, if all of the authority is out there, there's nothing I can do in this moment to shift the next. But we know there's something different. We know that Christ, the master teacher, the radical rabbi, taught a different way of living, a different way of seeing, and a different way of being. And that way was to awaken, to stop sleeping. But if we are so afraid of looking at our stuff, that we insist on staying asleep, then we tie up all of our creative energy. We tie up all of our ideating. We tie up all of the blessings that we have to be, to give, and to offer to this world in the monotony of human drama. The monotony of human drama. And frankly, right, that's where much of the world lives, in the human drama. We're so consumed with the details, the very small details of seemingly very large and important problems. We could think of some of them that would make us laugh in our own minds right now, right? Think of the details, the minutia of some of these so-called problems we have, and we're so consumed with them, defending our part in them, or creating stories around them, that what are we not present to? We're not present to the real flow of life, the real living waters that are birthing through us in each moment, calling us higher, asking us to elevate our game, asking us to wake up. Not just asking, but inviting. So are we ready to live boldly? Are we ready to live courageously? Are we ready to not be afraid of our stuff? When we're afraid of our stuff, we make it real. When we're afraid of our stuff, we give it power. When we're afraid of our stuff, we stay stuck. If we want a prescription for staying stuck, then deflect everything that anyone ever brings to you. Deflect everything that any external authority ever makes you aware of. Deflect any negative circumstance, situation, experience, or feeling. That which we fear, we won't see. When we defend something, we make it real and we give it power. When we engage the fear, when we engage our illusions, we sleep. And when we sleep, we're not awake to our creative potential. That's the human condition. There's no shame in it. There's nothing even really wrong with it, right? We live in and out of it every moment. Only when we become not attached to it. Only when I am just as unattached to my stuff as I am to yours. When I'm just as willing to see mine as I am to see yours. Amen for a world where every individual is just as encouraged and willing to discuss and look at their own stuff as they are to look at yours. Right? Because the obsession of the human condition is to look at everyone else's stuff. To talk about it, to look about it, to dance with it, to engage it, to delight in it, to smother ourselves with it, to problem solve it, to laugh about it, to mock it, to bully it. That's the human condition. But when we are really in our centered state, when we are in our awakened mind, it doesn't matter if it's your stuff or it's my stuff. It's just as interesting. It's just as impersonal. It is what it is. But when we don't when we don't take it on, and when we externalize it, when we push it away, when we fear it, we begin to create concepts and ideas like there is something against me, something is someone else's fault, and we do not awaken to our full spiritual potential because we are always projecting and always avoiding. In traditional Christianity, this is called the devil. It's no wonder we came up with this concept of the devil. Charles Fillmore talks about the devil, and if you're new to Unity, this is going to be a fun introduction today. Because we don't talk about the devil as being a little man, a little red man in a frying pan that's here to follow you around and tempt you to do bad things. It's the reason why bad things happen. That's a power and a force to be reckoned with that goes against God, is of its own authority and its own volition, and is terrorizing this planet, your lives, and your families. That's not the devil that we teach. But we do teach about a devil. Are you ready? And it's not the devil's food cake that the sisters of Myrtle have made for after the service today, or the angel food cake. The devil is the mass of thoughts that have been built up in race consciousness through many generations of earthly experiences and crystallized into what may be termed human personality or carnal mind, which opposes and rejects God. The devil is a state of consciousness adverse to the divine good. Other names for this state of consciousness are the adversary, the carnal mind, the accuser, or one of my favorites, the old man. This is Charles Fillmore. He says there is no personal devil. God is the one omnipresent principle of the universe. There is no room for any principle of evil, personified or otherwise. But it makes a lot of sense that we created the idea of one, right? Because the human condition and the ego will do anything in its power to get that outside of itself. But until we recognize that the full authority to do good or to do evil, to bring forth more God into this world, into ourselves, or to press God out, to edge God out. The acronym for ego, to edge God out, until we recognize that all of that authority rests within each one of us, and we go bravely, courageously, boldly, and unapologetically into that practice. Joyfully, actually. Feeling good, actually. Laughing. We'll be cutting ourselves short. Until we go into that, we'll still be having conversations about devils and external authorities, calling it a world that is against us, when in fact, we are standing on infinite potential. When in fact, there is an immense amount of unutilized, unrecognized, uncashed in spiritual lottery tickets and good that we are sitting on in every moment. In every moment. In this moment, each one of us. So are we ready to take on a spiritual practice where we commit not to externalize our accountability or our authority, but instead, in moments of conflict, to ask ourselves a few questions? What's mine here? What's mine here? Anytime we have a seeming desire to defend, anytime we feel like we're in trouble, anytime we feel the negative, are we willing to ask the question, what's mine here? When have I been here before? When have I felt this feeling before? How may I have externalized my accountability? Because even this silly little example, right, of getting a speeding ticket, I've shared this before, but I think it's just kind of a funny example of how we look at things. When I get a speeding ticket, I just decide that that's my paying my dues for like a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years until I get the next one. Rather than feeling punished by an external source, the officer writing the check, rather than feeling like they're stealing my money, or why do we do this? Why do we create these systems where we penalize ourselves? There's so many other bad things happening. I was just going a few miles over the speed limit, or more than a few. Instead of externalizing that authority, I realize I just gave anyone at any point permission, anytime I'm going over the speed limit, to call me accountable on that decision, and I fully and willingly am ready and willing and wanting to take full responsibility of that choice. And if that looks like getting a ticket or paying the ticket, well, that's the natural repercussions of the thoughts and the actions that I'm having. And if I'm going to be integrity with that, I just wave to everyone and say, I got this one, it's on me. Drive on by, speed on by, I got this one, it's on me. You see how it's a different whole consciousness. So take that little fun example and think, if we could really expand that to our whole lives, really expand that, what would we see? What would we see? Because the other option is looking at it and making them the devil, making someone else nasty, making someone else, I didn't have that money. They just took it. Takers? Bad rule makers? Crazy systems, why do we pay people to do this to us? How many times do we do that in our lives? So when we find that aspect of ourselves, where there's something we don't like going on in our life, where there's some agreements that are broken, when there's something that's not going the way we feel like it should, are we ready to take a hard look and not swim away and instead swim right into it? Swim right into it. There was a great reading shared with me by Mark Nepo in his book, The Book of Awakening. And he references an environmental naturalist that is telling the story about salmon. And he says that salmon make their way upstream by bumping repeatedly into blocked pathways until they find where the current is the strongest. So they keep bumping until they find where the current is the strongest. Now, this is the current moving against them, right? Where the current moving against them is the strongest. So they swim and they bump and they move until they find that spot where the current, the resistance, the problem, whatever it is, you fill in the blank, is the strongest. Somehow they know that the unimpeded rush of the water means that there is no obstacle there. You get that? There's not a rock on the other side making the way easy. There's water rushing in, which means it's a doorway. Somehow they knew that the water rushing in means that there is no obstacle. So they enter this opening fervently. For though it is the hardest going, the way is clear. He says the lesson here is as unnerving as it is helpful. In facing both inner and outer adversaries, the passage of truth comes at us with a powerful momentum because it is clear and unimpeded. So, where we sense the rush of truth is where we must give our all. He goes on to say, as human beings, the blocked pathway of our journey can take on many forms, and whether it be in avoiding conflict with others, or not taking the risk to love, or in not accepting the call of spirit that would have us participate more fully in our days, it is often easier to butt up continually against these blocked pathways than to enter fervently the one passage that is so powerfully clear. In this regard, salmon innately model a healthy persistence by showing us how to keep nosing for the unimpeded way, and once finding it, how to work even harder to make it through. Smart little fish. Are we ready to ask ourselves the tough questions? Are we ready to look in those directions and to keep moving forward rather than retreating and finding a new river, rather than bumping up against the same rocks and hollering at the rocks expecting them to change or move? On the Collective Evolutions page, they had a post that said, the mind is a powerful force. It can enslave us or empower us. It can plunge us into the depths of misery or take us to the heights of ecstasy. Learn to use this power wisely. Namaste. So will you affirm with me? I allow my stuff to transform me. Bring it on. It's not real anyway. Here I come. And together we allow the Christ consciousness and compassion, those powers, to bring us through. To bring us through. And we know in truth that those principles, that practice will take us there, will it not? Amen.